you couldn't guess by the mug, I have something important to talk with you guys about today. Also, this feels a bit like a coffee commercial, so here we go with that, I guess. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Phil at the Movies. I'm your host, Phil Walsh, and this is episode number 106 of this ongoing podcast series that is for the love of movies. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in each week and hearing or watching what I have to say on all things movie related. If you are watching on the YouTube channel, welcome back. This is the second episode for the channel, and I would encourage you to hit the like button, hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, stay plugged in so you can watch each new episode drop every Friday. And of course, if you are listening on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your favorite podcast, that will remain as it has been from the beginning. But of course, I would encourage you to subscribe, rate and review, and share the podcast with your family, your friends, anybody who you think might enjoy listening to a fellow movie buff go on and on, perhaps too long at certain points, over his love of movies. Quick show for you today. No new movies to review or talk about, but I do have some reactions to a trailer that dropped this week. Also have some movie mail questions from you, the listeners, you, the friends. I've been compiling them for a couple weeks now and have put together our first mailbag episode for the show. So thank you for sending me your questions. Thank you for sending me all of your comments and whatnot. Looking forward to answering them in short order. And last but certainly not least, I have a reaction to a film that I saw for the first time in 16 years on the big screen. You can probably guess which film I am talking about, and I will actually start right there. The Dark Knight was back on the big screen. I saw it for the first time in 16 years this past week, and what an incredible experience that was. I won't go on too much about it because, as probably are well aware, I love this film. And any chance I can talk about it, it will ultimately dominate the discussion. And I don't want to clog up the podcast with my praise and love for The Dark Knight, because you've certainly heard me go on about that many times before. And I'm sure there'll be another future episode where I can just gush uncontrollably about it. I will just say, seeing it on the big screen for the first time in nearly 16 years was an incredible experience. It felt like I was being transported back to 2008. It felt like I was returning to the summer when it was released. I had the same expression, the same reaction of awe, wonder, joy, and just pure amazement at this film. It is monumental. It holds up, no surprise. It is the greatest Batman movie, greatest comic book movie, in my opinion, and remains nearly 16 years later to be my favorite film of all time. So what a night, what an experience. The film is incredible, and it was such a joy and frankly a privilege and honor to watch it again on the big screen. Certainly I've seen it more times than I can count in the years that have passed since 2008, but there's nothing like seeing the film on the big screen, being immersed in that experience, having the lights come down, and just being transported into that universe again. It was just a perfect night at the movies. But I will stop right there because I will certainly dominate the rest of the podcast with The Dark Knight if I don't stop right now. But again, what a night, what an experience, and again, felt like I was being taken back to 2008. Now, switching gears a little bit, a trailer dropped this week. Now, you can imagine, based on my reaction, that the trailer is for Joker Folie Deux. This, of course, is the sequel to 2019's Joker, this time starring Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga as Joker and Harley Quinn, respectively. Now, I have been invested in this film since it was announced back in 2022, and my ticket has been bought. I'm a strong defender of the first film. I know Joker is not for everybody. There seems to be universal consensus or near universal consensus with regards to Phoenix's performance, but I know the film it can be divisive and it is not for everybody. I personally love it. I think it is one of the greatest comic book films ever made. Not to to say nothing of it being a just a great film overall. But when they announced a sequel, I kept thinking, okay, how are they going to do this? How are they going to one up the original? Because certainly you can't have it be a rehash of the same film. You can't have it just be a slightly larger budget and a little bit darker here, a little bit darker there. You've got to do something different. You've got to reinvent the wheel. Well, based on this trailer alone, that is what they have done with the film. Todd Phillips and company are cooking up something truly special, I believe, and the trailer seems to be showing that off. The film, of course, is supposed to be a musical or have musical elements to it. Not quite sure how that is all going to play out, but like I said, I'm here for the ride. And based on the images, based on what we saw in the trailer, this film looks to be an immersive, wild, surreal, twisted, oddly romantic, downright beautiful, and frankly dastardly film. I am excited for it. Lady Gaga looks to have transformed into Harley Quinn. I don't see her at all in the short snippets that have been released. It really feels like she's bringing her game for this film, and it should be no surprise. She's a great actress in a number of different films. House of Gucci, A Star Is Born. This seems to be the next level for her. Phoenix, of course, it never phones in a performance, and he looks to be bringing in another masterclass performance as the Joker. But the film itself continues, I think, the themes of the first film of questioning what is reality, what is fantasy, how much of this is in his head, how much of this is in her head. But the canvas has been expanded, so to speak. If the first film was a slow burn, this seems to be the explosion, if you will. This is the aftermath. It looks wild. It looks like a thrill ride, a blending of surreal fantasy moments with real life. I was in awe of the trailer. I had high expectations for it, and it just blew it right through the roof. So roll on October 4th. I can't wait to see this movie. I think it is going to be something special. And what I'm really excited about, people who may have been on the fence or were not fans necessarily of the first film seem to be coming over to this side of the table, so to speak. And again, we welcome all converts for anyone in the Joker category. So welcome to the club. We're happy to have you here. But let me know your thoughts. What did you think of the trailer? What did you think of Lady Gaga as Harley Quinn? I think it's going to be something different yet similar with regards to the character. I think she's going to make it her own, much like Phoenix did with the Joker in the first film, but still retaining those elements that make the character so universal and frankly beloved. But Joker, Folie, Deux, I think this is going to be one of the most talked about films of the year, and I do think it will be one of the year's most successful films. It certainly has all of the ingredients, and just from a cinematic landscape, Lauren Shear seems to be cooking up something beautiful. The images in this film are incredible, and you can see a few of them that I put up here. Absolutely blows my mind, and I'm expecting, much like the first film, this film to deliver something twisted and unexpected and frankly refreshing, which is not always the case with comic book movies as of late. So, as far as I'm concerned, more films like Joker, please. But I will stop right there and move on now to the mailbag portion of today's episode. Again, want to thank everybody for sending in their questions and comments, all things movie related. Going to try to do this every so often, but a lot of great questions, a lot of great topics for discussion. And the first one here, let me pull it up. This one comes from my friend Cookie, and I have to say this one really caught my eye because it's not something that I think about all the time. All right, so the first question, what movie is due for a remake that you would be excited to watch? Again, this comes from my friend Cookie on Twitter. I am generally not a fan of remakes. I think they tend to be inferior products that either cash in on a property or nostalgia. And certainly there are not many great remakes that I could name. One that does come to mind is A Star Is Born, the Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga film from a few years back. That would fall into the category of a good remake. It had something to offer. It wasn't just a rehash. But generally speaking, I'm not a fan of remakes because they tend to offer nothing new. And certainly in the horror genre, that seems to be the case. And there's a few films, I won't mention their names, but you can guess which ones I think are certainly subpar and frankly abominations across the board. But a film that I wouldn't mind seeing remade, it's an older one, and it is certainly a classic in every capacity, but it's the movie High Noon, the one that starred Gary Cooper. I would like to see that remade for a modern audience, but I would like to see a slight twist on it. Instead of it being a full remake, I would like to see it be a reimagining, if you will. Now, what I mean by that, I'd like to take the basic premise of High Noon, which is a marshal trying to defend his town against some outlaws while also feeling the pull to be with his bride and sort of ride off into the sunset. I'd like to see that carried over, but I would make it almost a hybrid, if you will. I would want to include elements from the show Gunsmoke, a popular Western that ran for 20 years on CBS, for those of you who may not know. And I would switch out the character of Kane with Marshal Matt Dillon to kind of bring in both worlds. I think it would be kind of interesting to take a very popular Western that ran for a number of years and sort of mold it into this very popular Western from, I believe, the early 1960s. But yeah, that would be my preference to see High Noon remade, possibly in that format. But even just for a modern audience, I think the film could be redone in quite an interesting way, and maybe something even Kevin Costner could get behind. And if you're a fan of Yellowstone, I think he would certainly bring some creativity to such a film and would make it well worth everybody's time with something new to offer. But Cookie, thank you for that question. That was certainly one that got me thinking, and is definitely a provocative topic because remakes certainly elicit a lot of passion, needless to say. The next question comes from Jay. Which classic Universal monster deserves the Prestige remake? Again, tough with remakes because they certainly are common in the horror genre. But if we're talking a classic Universal monster, I would like to see Phantom of the Opera remade, specifically the Claude Rains version. I have a soft spot for that particular adaptation. I think it's a great blend of both a tragic love story and a high stakes thriller. And Claude Rains, as always, delivers a masterful performance in whatever he does, but he's particularly exceptional as the Phantom of the Opera. So I'd like to see that redone for a modern audience and maybe kind of separate or get away from the more common interpretation of Phantom of the Opera being a gothic love story. I'd like to see it be more in line with a horror film again, much like the 1940s film starring Claude Rains. So that would be my take if I had my druthers to have a Universal monster remade. But certainly their attempt at a cinematic universe in recent years has not gotten off to a great start. So I don't necessarily have high hopes that there'll be a new batch of Universal monster movies, but we can hope nevertheless. Let's see. Next one comes from Emmett. Rank these in levels of importance when it comes to making a good movie: director, writer, actors. This question I really had to think about because this is such a multi-part and multi-layered question. Because certainly in a lot of cases you have directors who are both filmmakers and writers, and so in that situation you kind of are killing two birds with one stone. But generally speaking, an idea has to come from somewhere. You can't make something out of nothing. And so an idea has to be formed or developed, if you will. So I would say first and foremost, if the director is not also a writer, I think the writer has to come first in terms of priority because somebody has to come up with the idea that can be ultimately turned into a movie. So number one, I think you have to have a writer. Then, of course, I think you have to have a director because you have to have someone to bring what's on the page to life, bring it into the 3D format. And that requires vision, that requires skill, that requires some artistic style and signature. So I think you've got to have a director as the second component. The third would be actors, and that's not to diminish actors in any way, but I think in that situation, unless you're writing a film with somebody in mind, as does happen in on occasion, certainly Joker, to tie it back to that, was written with Joaquin Phoenix in mind. But generally speaking, people may have ideas for somebody, but it doesn't always translate or pan out in reality. So I would say actors would be last on the list, but that doesn't diminish their importance to the project as well, because filmmaking is a collaborative effort. It truly is a teamwork effort with everyone working in tandem to bring something to life. And again, certainly there's a lot of credit and praise that goes to the director and writer, but it's everybody from the sound design to production design to the person who's making the coffee, if you will. Everybody has a part to play in making a movie, and it truly is a collaborative effort that involves many different skills and many different talents coming together to create some unifying project. But yeah, that was a really great question, and I would actually put it to you guys. What do you think is the most important aspect in making a movie? How would you rank writer, director, actors? What would be your idea for that particular category? All right, next question on the list. And thank you, Emmett. That was a really insightful one, and I had a good time with that. The next one comes from Andrew. It's a two-part question. Number one, all-time favorite movie quote. Two, which movie had the biggest impact on your life when you first watched it? All right, so I will start with number one in the spirit of today's original topic, The Dark Knight. There was a line in the film near the end when Batman is battling the Joker that to me, any chance I can use this quote in everyday conversation, I try to, because it is such a universal line and it can be applied to any different situation and it can mean so many different things. The line comes from the Joker when he says, "It's a funny world we live in." And it certainly has been popularized in memes and GIFs online for a number of years, but I just love that line. It says so much, not only about the character and what's going on in the movie, but you can literally apply it to any situation in life. And I have found myself in many situations over the last few years saying, it's a funny world we live in, because it certainly does describe a lot of state of affairs. But yeah, that would be my favorite movie quote of all time. Certainly not a conventional one, so to speak. It's not "May the Force be with you," but certainly those Dark Knight aficionados will know the line by heart. But the second question, which movie had the biggest impact on your life when you watched it? Certainly, The Dark Knight is right there. I mean, that movie changed my life overnight. It was a truly a magnificent piece of cinema. But if I wind the clock back further, the first film that I remember watching that had the most impact on me after seeing it was Jaws. And the reason for Jaws was not only is it a perfect film, as Quentin Tarantino has described it, but Jaws is a wonderful film to learn about the art of filmmaking. There's so many great documentaries and behind the scenes featurettes that showcase the making of this particular film. And I remember watching the film and being inspired by it and in awe of it, and then wanting to know how the film was made. And there's countless documentaries and features that you can watch. And I remember eating all of that stuff up as a kid, being almost just as hooked on it, no pun intended, as the film itself. So yeah, definitely Jaws is one of those films that I remember just having this incredible impact on my life and being like, wow, this is not only a great movie, but how did they do that? And then, of course, when you know Steven Spielberg's genius behind it, this is one of his first films right out of the gate, and all the problems they had going on with the shark not working and the trouble of filming at sea. It's just a masterclass in filmmaking, and certainly one that I love to revisit and learn about. And you can still find new information time and time again, and that's another reason why that film is celebrated all of these years later. So thank you for that question, Andrew. That was a great one. Last question here on the docket. Favorite Stanley Kubrick film? For me, easy, The Shining. I love that film. I think it is one of the greatest horror films ever made. I love it because it deviates from the book a great deal. I'm a big believer when you have a book and you're translating it into a film, it should not be a page to screen direct adaptation. There should be some creative flourishes and alterations with the film. And that seems to have been the case with The Shining. I know Stephen King was not a fan of the film, but I personally think it's better than the book. And just the look of the film, the sound effects, the score, Nicholson's performance, Shelley Duvall's performance. It's an unsettling film, but it has almost a majestic quality to it, and I think that's really a testament to Kubrick and his genius, if you will. So yeah, no question in my mind. The Shining, easily my favorite film by the late great Stanley Kubrick. But all right, that does it for our mailbag questions. So thank you everybody for sending me your movie related topics. Again, if you have a question, drop it in the comments, bug me on social media, send me an email. All that information is in the show notes, and I will certainly start compiling more questions for future episodes to talk about and answer at a future point. But great questions all the way around, and thank you everybody for sending them in. But that does it for me today. As always, I want to thank you for tuning in and hearing and watching what I have to say on all things movies. I'll be back next week, and we will certainly do this all over again for the love of movies.